morning. Behind me is an image of a cemetery. Cemeteries can be interesting places, but they can also be confronting and challenging places. The place we go to bury our dead, the place of finality, the final place, the resting place. They can be confronting. The death is an end. In my experiences in cemeteries, in burying people, the sadness and the pain that people feel, that grips them, that holds them, the tears and the anguish, the despair in some people's lives. It's a strange image to have as a background in this Easter week, when we celebrate resurrection and new life breaking into our lives. But resurrection comes to us in the context of this pain and grief and struggle, this powerlessness and vulnerability we feel in our lives. It's in those moments of vulnerability and pain and struggle that the cracks in our lives that we try and cover over appear. And as Leonard Cohen says, there's cracks in everything. It's where the light gets in. And it's in those cracks, in those vulnerable points and places, that this light of resurrection, this gentle flickering candlelight or flaming light of sunrise breaks into our lives, bringing some hope, new life, new possibilities, even in the midst of death. We could have had other images on the background, maybe these ones, the Ukraine, that evil invasion, that horrific scenes that we see on our TV screens and social media daily, the suffering, the violence, the horror, the needless stupidity of it all. Or the scenes of pain in people's lives, the gangland shootings and warfare that happens, that breaks out from time to time in neighbourhoods or in the cities of our world, or the impoverishment of people's lives, where people are starving, suffering diseases and dying. Or the helpless despair of refugees as they trek long dusty roads away from their home to a place of refuge, or cross the seas in boats, who sit in refugee camps or get locked away in detention centres. The pain of their lives, the loneliness, or the lonely despair of people in their grief, in their loss, in the demons that challenge their mind and being, that lead to thoughts of suicide or self-harm. The images of our own lives where there may be hopelessness or despair or loss or confusion or emptiness or loneliness or uncertainty. The homes across our land where there is domestic violence, where women and children in particular live in fear and anguish and despair. It's in all of these places that the possibility of resurrection and new life can break in and burst in. It's into these situations that resurrection and its message of transformation and new life is most profound and poignant. It's these cracks in the life of the world and our lives where this light gently seeps through into our darkness, bringing hope. And it was the background of these resurrection stories we hear in the stories of Jesus is of grief and death, his death. The story we read in John's story of Jesus, the disciples are locked away in this upper room, this locked room, a room that's got solid walls and locked doors, where the world cannot break in, It's a room of fear and grief and despair and anguish and pain and utter emptiness. All their hopes, all their dreams, all their expectations in this Jesus who came and was so obviously of God and promised so much. Well, their hopes and dreams hung on a cross. They turned to dust, cast into the tomb with his broken body. And the disciples are desperate and despairing. But they're also fearful, because on this first day of the week, this Sunday, after this long Saturday and Friday, this long Sabbath, and now they're in this room, this locked room, afraid of the authorities, afraid of Rome and the nation's leaders, and afraid, desperate, grieving, lost. And into this hopelessness, this risen Christ materialises through locked doors and solid walls, and speaks peace be with you, and breathes on them the Spirit of God, the Spirit of resurrection, the Spirit of love, and says, receive this Spirit. Go into the world and be people of reconciliation and forgiveness, liberation and hope. Share this light and love and hope of resurrection with all the world. Go. And then he disappears. That's the story. And Thomas, the disciple's not there. And when he comes back, they tell him, confused, excited, uncertain, what does this all mean? And he wants to believe, but he can't. Unless he sees and experiences for himself, he can't. He can't believe vicariously. A week later, they're still in the room. They're still locked away. They're still fearful and anguished and despairing and desperate. Resurrection transforms us, but may not be in an instant. Sometimes it's days and weeks and months and years. Anyway, he's there, they're there, and this risen Christ materialises and says to Thomas, look at the scars and the wounds in this, my being. And he believes. He experiences and believes, and this Christ disappears. He's known in the scars. This risen Christ, this presence of God is known in the scars, in the wounds. Known by his wounds, but known in the wounds. He's known in the wounded places, the broken places, the shattered places, the places of despair and desperation and longing and hope and yearning. Brokenness. Cracks where the light gets in. He's known. That's where he's known in our world. Desmond Tutu tells a story in the deepest, darkest days of apartheid. He and some colleagues gathered in this closed down theological seminary. It was closed because of the racist policies of South Africa. They gathered to talk and share and support. And in the midst of it, he needs some space and some time alone, so he goes out into the garden, into the courtyard, and there's this big cross, big, huge wooden cross, and it's got nails, spikes, nails sticking out, and a crown of thorns. And he stands looking at it, and all around in this cold, deep, dark winter is dead grass. And the trees are dead and bare of leaves and just gnarled. The whole place speaks of death. And Tutu thinks and ponders and remembers that in a few months' time it'll be spring, and this courtyard will be filled with green grass. It will burst into life, and those trees, the sap will flow through the limbs and the leaves will burst out, and there'll be birds singing. The whole place will be alive with light and life and vitality. And he knows that in the winter of his despair, this winter of gloom and doom and pain and darkness, the winter of apartheid, it can't last forever, because this cross And this resurrection that transformed these disciples from these desperate, despairing, hopeless people into people of courage and life and vitality, proclaiming a new way in the world, this way of Jesus. This transformative power to transform our world is here. It's all around us. It's built into the life of the world, into the transformation of trees and the first buds of spring bursting out of flowers, of new life being born, of the sun rising and shining more brightly, of that moment when hope breaks into the human life. And we know we can live. It's this promise that God is with us in the deepest, darkest moments and will not let us go. And in that Tutu thinks and remembers resurrection and understands that there is nothing in this whole universe that can separate us from this love, from this hope, from this light, from this power of new life and resurrection, this power of God, which is the love at the heart of all things, which transforms all things and brings all things back into this place of love and life. And that is the hope of resurrection, our hope in the midst of our darkness, in the midst of our despair, in the midst of our confusion and uncertainty. God is with us, and the risen Christ is everywhere.